como símbolo de que estamos caminando con nuestros mártires, les voy a pedir si nos podemos, los que puedan, ponernos de pie en un símbolo de que estamos caminando. So as a symbol that we're all walking together with our martyrs, whoever is able or wishes to, if you can sing with me together, and we'll stand up together. Caminando, caminando, vamos caminando hacia el sol. Caminando, caminando, vamos caminando hacia la libertad. I can see this is a very bilingual group. But you know the thing with Spanish, don't be intimidated, just focus on the vowels. Y, okay? And it's caminando means walking. But really, the sense of this song is wandering, particularly in solidarity with all those who walk on a skateboard because they don't have any legs, or folks who need to use crutches or wheelchairs or any other instrument to move. And so we're wandering. Caminando, caminando, vamos caminando hacia el sol. Vamos caminando hacia el sol. Caminando, caminando, vamos caminando hacia la libertad. And caminando is a zipper song. In organizing, a zipper song is a song that you keep the same refrain and then you zip in the operative word. But we're not going to do the whole song, but it's libertad, is verdad, unidad, paz, libertad. We'll just do two of the verses. No hay camino ya hecho, pero hay brecha preparada. Nuestros mártires la abrieron caminando la jornada. There is no road already made, no, but there are little paths opened by our martyrs, our ancestors, those who've come before us. No hay camino ya hecho, pero hay brecha preparada. Nuestros mártires la abrieron. Opened by those on whose shoulders we stand. So I'm going to ask you to think of a name. Les voy a pedir que piensen en un nombre de una persona sobre cuyos hombros ustedes están parados. Están aquí por esa persona. Think of a name, a very concrete name of a person who's responsible for you to be here today, who formed you, who affected you, who inspired you in some way that has brought you in your life to this point that you're here today. You have that name in your mind? Okay, cuando cuente a las 3, lo vamos a decir bien fuerte. When I count to 3, we'll say that name very loud. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Guadalupe. Nice. Nuestros mártires la abrieron. 1, 2, 3. Guadalupe. Fuerte. Stronger. You're whispering it. I want you to yell it and invite him. 1, 2, 3. Guadalupe. Eso. How did they open the road for us? ¿Cómo la abrieron? Caminando. 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 La jornada. Welcome to all our ancestors. Caminando, caminando. Vamos. Vamos caminando hacia el sol. Caminando, caminando. Vamos caminando hacia la libertad. Oh.
Welcome everybody. everybody. I have the honor to welcome you on behalf of the National Lawyers Guild, the local chapter. We're based here in this neighborhood, just a few blocks away at 558 Cap Street, but we're also connected to the national organization and to the international work it does. And that's what inspires us today, is those connections. That's what we want to explore. Entonces es un honor darles la bienvenida. Mi nombre es Camilo, en nombre del Gremio Nacional de Abogadas y Abogados y específicamente de nuestra rama aquí en el área de la Bahía. We're not going to be able to translate everything perfectly, fully, but we will try to make this as bilingual as possible. We have a couple of different motivations for coming together today, at this moment, and specifically these dates. So I just want to briefly kind of summarize that, but most of that will be reflected in what we'll be hearing and in what's evident here that Christina will shortly explain to us and hear. What are the two objectives? One is we want to honor migrant lives. We want to honor the lives of migrants who are struggling at this moment at the border, denied entry, denied asylum, detained, expelled, and the origin of their struggle in the injustices that this country is responsible for, which means we are responsible too. More concretely, we want to remember specifically, coming up on May 27th, it will be 2 months since the fire at the detention center in Ciudad Juarez that many of you may have heard about. It was on March 27th, where 40 migrants died from 6 countries, locked into their cells, detained under inhumane conditions, in a cell that was made for 50 people, 68 were being detained, and they died as they were protesting those conditions on hunger strike because they had been denied water. This was on the other side of the border, on the Mexican side of the border. And one of the things we want to emphasize today is that sadly what happened on March 27 epitomizes what is unfolding on the border as we speak. So we have a couple of colleagues who will be reporting back from the Journey for Justice to the border. They were there in December. They'll be our closing speakers, but I just want to kind of frame what they're going to be sharing with us. And what they're going to be showing us through their testimony is that the conditions that produced those deaths were bought and made in the U.S. through U.S. policy and have been unfolding at the border for the last few years. So the origins of that tragedy in Ciudad Juarez go way back and are structural. And in fact, they're not just about the Biden administration, they're about the prior administration and every administration that's been in power in this country from both parties for over 30 years. Essentially, the policies have been the same. The names might change, the colors might change, but the essence of the policies have been the same, and they're what are called, this is the official doctrine of the Border Patrol in its strategic plan in 1994, they call it prevention through deterrence. That's what we saw at the border when we were there together in December. That's what led to the death of the migrants in the Ciudad Juarez detention center. But now it's on both sides of the border. We know about the story on this side, but what many of us have not yet focused on enough is the way U.S. authorities on this side of the border and Mexican authorities on that side of the border are essentially applying the same policy, which is a machinery of death and of destruction. So whether it's Biden and López Obrador, or whoever succeeds Biden, or whoever succeeds López Obrador, or whoever preceded them, they are jointly responsible for these conditions. And these conditions go back not just to U.S. policy, but to a structure of domination that many of us identify as imperial, on the part of the U.S. This is what are the so-called root causes of these deaths. We want to remember these migrants and the 2 that have died within the last 8 days. 2 more migrants. A young man, 17 years old, Luis Angel from Honduras, near Tampa, Florida, in a supposed shelter, right, where he was supposed to be receiving support family services, where his medical needs were identified and ignored, and he died because of that. And Anadith Tanay, from Panama, originally her family from Honduras, 8 years old, who died in the custody of the Border Patrol. This is within the last week. Maybe you've begun to hear about Anadith, maybe you've begun to hear about Luis Angel, but we need to have them present here today, along with the 40 who are present here, their names. Each one of the 40 are present here under the monarch butterfly. We need to think that these are not, in fact, exceptional cases. In fact, they represent the rule. They represent what is the now governing policy in our name at the border on both sides. Because many of us have family in Mexico también, right? Or come originally from Mexico or from the countries of origin that were affected by this tragedy. It's our honor to welcome in that context. It's an extraordinary honor to welcome the organizations that are represented here. We'll be introducing them one by one, but we couldn't have done this without Global Exchange, Ted Lewis. We couldn't have done this, of course, without the Lawyers Guild itself, without Instituto Familiar de la Raza that's present here. You'll be hearing one of the staff persons from Instituto Familiar de la Raza right here in the mission, Carlos Izaguirre. We're honored to welcome him. He'll be speaking later. There's a compañera Carolina from the Chiapas Support Committee, representing the Chiapas Support Committee. We'll be introducing their work. But we want to first introduce Terry Vallon from the International Migrants Alliance. Yeah, first we're going to have Cristina. Terry, first we're going to have Cristina, just so you're kind of on deck. Cristina's going to explain the symbols, and then Terry will be our first speaker because he has another commitment. Cristina, por favor.
Thank you. Muy bien.
Esto es para la cámara, pero muy fuerte para la cámara.
Oh, ok. Muy bien, esto es para la cámara, así que hay que hablar fuerte para ustedes. Muy bien. Muy buenas tardes.
Good evening, everybody.
Es un honor, un gran honor estar esta tarde participando en algo muy sagrado,
It's an honor to be participating in something very sacred with y'all,
honrando a nuestros hermanos migrantes.
honoring our sisters and brothers in migration
Estamos honrando a nuestros hermanos caídos.
who have fallen on the way.
Y honrando a estos hombres valientes de Guatemala, estamos honrando a todos los migrantes del mundo.
And in honoring these names of courageous people, we're honoring all migrants in the world.
Es muy importante que esta noche abramos nuestros corazones, pero que sintamos desde los intestinos.
It's important
Las
tonight that we
tripas.
open our hearts, but we feel
Importante.
it from our guts.
Hay que sentirlo
That we feel it from our guts,
y hay que hablarlo.
and we're able to speak it.
Que nunca tengamos miedo de hablar de un migrante,
That we never be afraid to speak of a migrant's experience,
y menos de nuestros migrantes caídos.
and much less of those who have died.
Me dijeron que si quería hablar un poco de los símbolos.
So I was asked to speak a little bit about the symbols.
3 minutos me dijeron.
So I've got 3 minutes.
3 minutos es como un sueño para hablar de estos
But
símbolos.
3 minutes is like a dream to be able to speak about these symbols.
¿Quién puede hablar en 3 minutos de este símbolo de zapatos migrantes que cruzan
Speak in 3 minutes
la
of the
frontera?
symbol of migrant shoes that cross the border.
Y no nomás una frontera, sino que cruzan 3, 4 fronteras,
And
5
not just one border,
mares, cruzan
but
mares.
several borders.
Y esto significa simplemente caminamos, todos somos migrantes caminantes por el mundo.
And it symbolizes
Esto
that
es
we
el
all
gran-
are migrants walking through the world.
El gran significado de que necesitamos libertad,
The great meaning that we need freedom,
que buscamos el amor
that we look for love,
y que amamos mucho a nuestros seres queridos,
and that we love
a nuestras familias,
families.
símbolo de hijos,
Symbol of
de
children,
padres, de
parents,
hermanos.
sisters, brothers, siblings.
Nadie sale de un país por pura alegría de decir, no me gusta el mío.
No one leaves their country just because they
Todos amamos nuestros países.
We all love each of our countries.
Entonces,
Regresame.
no se nos olviden, estos zapatos son zapatos de amor.
So don't forget, these are shoes of love.
Una mochila.
The backpack.
En segundos lo vamos a decir porque ya se está pasando los 3 minutos. Una mochila.
Within my 3 minutes.
Para hablar de esta mochila necesitaríamos un taller de 3 días, un retiro de un fin de semana.
We need a 3-day weekend retreat.
En esta chamarra, en estas mochilas van las fotos de los hijos,
Here go the
de la
pictures
madre,
of the
de la
mother,
hermana.
of the children, of the
Sí.
siblings.
Va ahí San Judas Tadeo,
Saint Jude, the
una
miraculous
medallita, una
worker,
oración.
little medal, a prayer.
En esta mochila va cargada de esperanzas,
This backpack is full of hope,
de sueños.
dreams.
¿Cuántos sueños? Voy
How
para
many dreams?
las Américas, voy para Estados
I'm
Unidos,
going to the US.
voy a cambiar el mundo de mi familia,
I'm going to change the world of my family.
voy a trabajar,
I'm going to work.
voy a enviarles para que coman,
I'm going to send them money
para
to
que
eat,
vivan, para que vivan con todos sus derechos, con casa,
to
con
live with all the rights, with a house.
esta mochila.
With this backpack,
Van cargando la vida de todo un pueblo.
carrying the life of an entire people.
Y ustedes la pueden ver y van a decir, ¿pero qué cabe ahí?
And you may
Aquí
say, well, what
cabe
fits
la
in this
vida de
backpack?
nuestros pueblos
The life of our people.
y los pueblos de todo el mundo,
Of all the world.
no nomás Latinoamérica.
Not just Latin
Todos
America.
somos hermanos,
We are all siblings.
divididos por fronteras
Divided by
de hombres avarientos
borders created by
que se han
greedy
ganado
men
el poder.
who've
Sí.
taken power.
Entonces, necesitamos talleres para eso.
So we need a workshop for this backpack.
Con esa mochilita, cuando salen las personas de sus hogares,
That backpack, when people leave their house,
les dice su madre, siempre
their
hoy
mother,
escucho esto,
always I hear this phrase.
hijo, no se te olvide la chamarra,
Child, don't forget your jacket, your windbreaker.
cúbrete,
Cover yourself.
el camino es bien largo,
The road is
no te
long.
la quites,
Don't take it off.
hazle una bolsita,
Make a little bag
Sí.
inside.
tómate estos 20 pesos que
Take
tenía
these
guardados,
pesos that I was keeping
aquí
for
los
you,
guarda,
put in here.
sí, les cortan los lados, esta chamarra es muy elegante para
It's a very
migrantes,
elegant jacket, actually.
pero fue la que conseguimos,
That's
¿verdad?
what we got.
Me hubiera gustado traer la que nos regalaron en Arizona.
I'd like to bring the one that we were
La de
given.
Arizona tenía guardado juguetitos de la bebé que cargaban.
Little toys that the person had kept as he cut a hole in them from their child.
Va bien parchadas.
So it's all patched up.
Pero esta chamarra es,
But-
es el amor de la madre
But
y de
this
la esposa.
jacket is the love of the mother,
La esperanza de que ve saludable,
the
cuídate,
hope, the caring.
Te
Take care of
esperamos.
yourself. We wait for you.
ven por nosotros.
Come back for
Eso
us.
significa esta
That's
chamarra.
what this jacket means.
Y aquí llegan con la mitad.
And here they arrive with half of the jacket still.
En Arizona nos invitaron a ir y recibir a migrantes.
In
Es-
Arizona, we were invited to go to a
Es
certain
una
space
experiencia
to receive
fuertísima,
recently
muy fuerte.
arrived migrants.
Van los franciscanos todos los días
This
se van
group
a
of
las 5 de la
Franciscans
mañana, a
go
las
at
4 de la
5 in the
mañana.
morning, early in the
desierto está
morning to
fuerte.
the desert.
Este galón que ven es
So this-
muy decente
Though
para
this
las
is an
botellas de
essential
agua que
piece, right?
encontramos.
for the water it's very decent compared to the bottles and cans that we found of
Sí,
water.
se encuentra el agua. Hay unos galones de los que ya cayeron en el desierto, de los que no hemos podido saber ni quiénes fueron los
And many of
caídos.
these gallons belong to people we will
Dejan el agua.
know who they were because they died and there was no way to identify
No,
them.
no está terminada
And the water is
porque
not finished
ellos siempre guardan la última gota.
because they always
Para
keep
cuando
the
ya no
last
puedan.
drop
Sí.
for when they can no longer go.
Porque cruzar el desierto de Arizona es muy
Because
pesado.
crossing the Arizona desert
Pero
is
gracias a
very
Dios
terrible.
tenemos gente muy buena que va y rescata a
But
algunos.
we have people who do go to the desert and
Pero
take
tenemos
water
muchos caídos. Y esta
in
es la
spite of
esperanza
all
de
the
la
fallen
vida.
we have. So this is life.
Entonces, guardar estos galones, recuerden, en estos galones viene mucha gente migrante de muchos países.
So in these gallons come many, many people from many countries migrating.
Sí. Y ya para
Ay, la
terminar, ya tienen su velita encendida.
And just to finish this section, I believe you all have your candle now with you.
Podemos pasarles, por favor, fuego.
And we'll pass the fire from the central little altar we made
Y
for you
mientras
to.
pasan el fuego, nos ponemos de pie otra vez.
And as you pass the fire, if we can all stand up, whoever can, whoever's able.
Pásense el fuego. Pásenlo.
If you want.
Pasen el
Yeah,
fuego.
you could pass it to them.
Rápido. Sí, porque los minutos son oro molido y nomás tenemos un programa de 1 hora. Con esta vela nos ponemos de pie, con todo el amor del mundo,
Well, all the love of the world,
con todo lo que somos,
with all that we are,
con todo nuestro coraje,
with all our courage,
nuestra valentía, con todo nuestro espíritu.
with all our spirit,
Vamos a enviarle esta lucecita
we will send this little light
a todo migrante que esté saliendo de sus hogares,
to
a
all
todo
migrants
migrante,
now leaving their home.
a todo migrante que carga sus sueños, aquí los vamos a
Of
esperar.
each migrant carrying their dreams, we
Eva.
will wait for them here.
Le vamos a mandar esta lucecita
And we will send this light to
desde
them
acá,
now,
desde nuestros vientres, de
from
nuestro
here, from
todo,
our guts, from our womb,
a los hermanos caídos
to those who've passed,
también, porque nosotros creemos en la luz y en la
because we
resurrección,
believe in the light.
y ellos ya son luz.
And now they are light.
Entonces, que esas lucecitas que se encuentran ahora ahí,
So that
vengan
these
y
lights
nos
that
iluminen
find
a
themselves
nosotros
here
también,
now
que
and then
compartan su luz con
illuminate
nosotros.
us, share their light with us.
Entonces cerramos con ese amor grande,
We close with that great love.
aunque haya esa política de silencio, pero para mí el silencio también es respeto. Vamos a hacer unos segundos de silencio para que
Let's keep a few seconds of silence,
Francisco lo interrumpa con una canción
and Francisco will interrupt that silence with a song
en donde nos unimos todos a él,
that brings us
diciendo,
together.
todos somos uno.
That brings us together, saying we all are one. No me pregunten quién soy, ni si me habían conocido. Los sueños que había tenido crecerán aunque no estoy. Ya no vivo, pero voy en lo que andaba soñando, y otros que siguen peleando harán brotar nuevas rosas en el nombre de estas cosas. Todos me estarán nombrando. No me pregunten la edad, tengo los años de todos. Yo elegí entre muchos modos ser más viejo que mi edad. Y mis años de verdad son los tiros que he tirado, nazco en cada fusilado, y aunque el cuerpo se me muera, tendré la edad verdadera el niño que he liberado. Oh, yeah. No me recuerden la cara, que fue mi cara de guerra, mientras hubiera en mi tierra necesidad de que odiar. Y en el cielo que ya aclara, sabrán cómo era mi frente, me vio reír poca gente, pero mi risa ignorada la hallarán en la alborada del día que se presiente. What is that dream? Education for all. Healthy food. Healthy soil. Playgrounds for children. Mi tumba no anden buscando, porque no la encontrarán. Mis manos son las que van en otras manos luchando, y mi voz la que va gritando, mi cuerpo el que sigue entero, y sepan que solo muero si ustedes van aflojando, porque el que murió peleando vive en cada compañera, porque el que murió peleando vive en cada compañera. La, 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 la.
Nos podemos sentar, apagamos las velitas, llévense esa velita.
We can turn off our candles now, but take this candle with you
Y guárdenla como un símbolo de solidaridad con el hermano migrante.
and
Llévense.
keep it as a
Guárdenla.
symbol of solidarity with migrant people. And we can all have a seat.
Muchas gracias. Muchas gracias.
Yeah.
That
Why
was
don't-
María Cristina from Caminante Cultural Foundation. María Cristina de Fundación Cultural Caminante. Gracias.
Muchas gracias. I want to thank again Francisco Herrera and Maria Cristina Herrera from Caminante Cultural Foundation, which is one of the co-sponsors of this event. Maybe just so we can all be a little closer together, we could move the circle in a little bit so that everybody who's on the outside now can join us. And we're so honored that you're with us, Pierre and compañeros, compañeras. Thank you so much. Yeah. So we'll just take a moment to kind of bring the circle a little closer. Welcome, everybody. Bienvenidas, bienvenidos. Thank you for joining us, all of you. Thank you. So again, I'm Camilo from the Lawyers Guild, for those of you who weren't here when we did the initial opening. And we want to open up the first space of participation. We're going to have basically an open mic and then a couple of more focused presentations. We want to start with our dear brother, compañero, camarada, Terry Vallon, representing the International Migrants Alliance. I had the honor to be with them in Bangkok just a few months ago at their most recent international gathering, which was extraordinary. And Terry, I think, epitomizes one of the most important points that we want to emphasize about this event and this work, which is that the border is not something distant from us here. The border is not something exotic. It's not some other planet. It's not some other distant space. The border, as our event is entitled, is everywhere our communities, our families, and our struggles are present. So it's inherently here in the Bay Area, present through the enforcement activities of ICE and through the compañeras y compañeros that every day come to this community from organizations like the Haiti Action Committee, which will be present tonight as well. We're so honored that Pierre is with us, and other compañeras and compañeros, the Haitian community, the Filipino community, and many others. And that's why, again, it's so important that Terry brings the perspective of IMA. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Camilo, and everyone for allowing me to be here today with you all. Thank you, Christina, Maria Cristina, and Francisco for the cultural sharing. It's powerful to be here with you all in San Francisco. My name is Terry Val, and I actually work at a Filipino community center not far away in the Excelsior neighborhood. We opened up almost 20 years ago, right after September 11th, and the impacts of the Department of Homeland Security was gonna, they were gonna have attacks on our immigrant communities and in our homelands. So what Camilo said was very important. The border is everywhere, and we feel its enforcement on our communities right here in San Francisco and the interior of the United States. We've been doing work recently at the seaports. Filipino seafarers are about 25, 30% of the shipping industry. The global seafaring industry is Filipinos. And one of the main reasons is that we can't find jobs in our homelands. So our campaign as part of the International Migrants Alliance in USA is, we call it Serve the People, organizing solidarity from the border to our homelands, because we make those connections about how the border is everywhere. It's the physical border with Mexico and Canada, but every airport is a border. One of our the peace activists, human rights advocates from the Philippines went to SFO, Jerome Abba. He's from the Muslim communities in the southern Philippines. He was stopped, detained at the Customs and Border Protection at SFO, and he was tortured inside of SFO because of his political views and not allowed in the country. Held for 24 hours. We were there protesting for about 24 hours. And we made sure that even if they weren't going to let him into the country, we're going to make sure he got safely back to our homeland. But to continue the struggle and to continue that fight for migrants traveling all over the world. Christina mentioned there's others that nobody is choosing to leave our homelands. It's very powerful, the symbols, the shoes, the backpack, the jacket. Nobody wants to leave their homelands. We have beautiful homelands and countries. Haiti, the Philippines. It's been great to be in solidarity with the struggle of the Haitian people, Haiti Action Committee. The Black Alliance for Just Immigration has been part of IMA's work as well. We're building a global movement led by grassroots organizations. So IMA was founded in 2008 in Hong Kong. It has over 175 organizations all over the world, and it's led by grassroots migrants, refugee groups. Today, there's about, I would say, close to 300 million migrants, refugees, and forcibly displaced people. The people of Palestine, the people all over the world. That's equivalent to the total population of the United States. Imagine the entire population of the United States forced out of this country. So in the world, there's hundreds of millions of forced migrants, displaced refugees, and displaced people. When we talk about the root causes of migration, we talk about imperialism. The neoliberal policies that our countries have faced, our homelands have faced, not just the Philippines, but almost every third world country since the last 50 years or so, has forced many of our people to leave our homelands. Right? They cannot make a living in the Philippines. They cannot make a living in Mexico, in Central America, and throughout Africa and all of the third world and developing countries. So if they had the choice, many of the young people we work with at the Filipino Community Center, we would never have left the Philippines if they had the choice. And so the conditions they're facing under the economic policies that drive us out of our homelands, in addition to the wars of U.S. imperialism in our homelands all over the world. So, Camilo mentioned the fire in Juarez. So, it has been an honor to work with Camilo. I see Christine here and others, from New York. We've been together in Mexico City. When we saw the caravan in 2018 of tens of thousands of migrants coming up through the football stadium in Mexico City, we went there. We were there at the San Diego-Tijuana border, in El Paso and Juarez. And then in 2021, EMA, we did a border solidarity mission to Brownsville and Matamoros, South Texas, with the South Texas Human Rights Center. And then recently, as Camilo mentioned, some of our colleagues were on the Witness at the Border Journey for Justice from South Texas all the way to San Diego. And so all along the way, we see the inhumanity, the deaths that are happening, mass graves in Texas. When we were in El Paso and Juarez in 2018 in August, we heard about the huge detention facilities there and the deaths that are happening there as well. So all along the border is a site of the crisis, but the crisis, as Camilo mentioned, extends beyond the border into our homelands and has been going on for decades. So the IMA, International Migrants Alliance, started right after the WTO, the World Trade Organization's meeting, where they're promoting neoliberal globalization and how that's been devastating our homelands for several decades now. And I won't be able to say too much, but I'll point folks to our website later. But this free trade agreement, y'all know NAFTA, right? So the APEC, the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation, is the 21 member economies, including Mexico, Chile, Peru, the Philippines, etc. They're coming here to San Francisco in November. APEC summit will be here in November, and we're going to mount a huge protest, right? So y'all come out and join us against these neoliberal free trade policies that are devastating our homelands, devastating workers all over the world, the environment, all of those things. So Marcos Jr., the son of the dictator Ferdinand Marcos, is the president of the Philippines. He will be here. Biden will be here. AMLO will be here. So let's mount a huge protest. It's at the Moscone Center in November. So we invite you all to join that coalition. I'll leave flyers here. We have a meeting tomorrow to build that coalition. But this is the work we've been doing, is to build an international, what's that?
Where's the meeting?
At the Moscone Center in November.
No, your meeting tomorrow.
Our meeting tomorrow is online. So folks can sign up if they're interested to join. Individuals and organizations can join the coalition against APEC so that we can protest this particular free trade agreement. But it's one example of the neoliberal economic policies that have been devastating our homelands all over the world. Here's a great opportunity to confront it head on in our backyard. Kamala Harris decided she could invite them, but we have to let them know that, like the WTO in the 90s in Seattle, they will never again go to Seattle. They should never again be so bold to come to San Francisco again. So IMA is building an international movement of grassroots migrants, refugees, displaced people. We invite folks to join. Our website is ima-usa.org. Our recent statement talks about these neoliberal policies that have been affecting our homelands. I just want to read one of our members in Mexico shared some perspective on the Juarez fire in particular. Thank you. You can pass it around. Yeah, thank you. So they did some analysis. CHIRLA, do folks know CHIRLA? It's a big nonprofit out of Southern California, but is now national. So they have an international programs, and one of our colleagues, members of IMA, is there, Arturo. And so he shared this analysis of that fire in particular. He says survivors say that those who died did so for one reason. They could not or did not pay a $200 bribe to the security guards to be released. Only the migrants with means to pay were released. Others would have to stay in jail and be sent to Mexico City or deported back to their country of origin. All of the migrants that are leaving our homelands, the ones who died in the fire, are suffering from economic devastation on our homelands. They cannot find livelihood. They come here to this country. One of the root cause analyses that we use is a film called Los Eternos Indocumentados, the eternally undocumented. It was created by a group called the Human Rights Alliance for Child Refugees and Families. They've been organizing the unaccompanied minors that have been coming up, in the last decade or so. And then we recently heard that expose, right, of many of those migrant children were found working in factories all over the country for big corporations like Ben and Jerry's and, all these corporations. And so the economic devastation in our homelands and why they are here, that's some of the root cause that we want to address through our organizing work, is the liberation of our homelands, the ability to live and work in our homelands so we don't have to migrate. we don't have to leave our homelands. And then once at the border, for sure, there needs to be justice there. There's been a lot of, the church and interfaith groups, the witnessing at the border. We work with a group internationally called the Churches Witnessing with Migrants, and the humanitarian aid that people have been providing. But we need to be organizing also there at the border and with everybody who's crossing the border once they are here. So those migrant children who are found in the factories. I'll just read a little bit more of what he wrote there. They said, "I'm only alive because my family paid," he said as he grabbed the bars outside the detention center, a day after the blaze amid a crowd of migrants who had either survived the fire or were still looking for loved ones. And then allegations that the guards operating the center in Ciudad Juarez extorted migrants in exchange for releasing them, promises to fuel further outrage at the Mexican government over the dozens of deaths in the fire. They also could explain why immigration officials in Ciudad Juarez arrested hundreds of migrants the day of the fire and brought them to the detention center, including families with children. So we see this inhumane crisis at the border that is a symptom or a manifestation of the larger crisis of imperialism in the world today. And so we're organizing against that, at every front, in our homelands, at the border, here in the interior of the United States. If we can mount a big protest at the APEC, gathering in November, then that's us expressing solidarity with migrants all over the world and in solidarity with our national liberation struggles in our homelands as well. So the economic crisis that is also manifesting through this, unfortunately in a fire that has killed dozens of people. The altar here, again, really grounds us in why we are here and why we need to continue to struggle and continue to organize to build the grassroots migrants movement all over the world. So I thank you for inviting me today, Camilo, and for building this community here in San Francisco so that we can strengthen the bonds of solidarity from the border to our homelands. Thank you very much.
I want to mention a couple of the organizations that are here that have been absolutely crucial in making this event happen and that continue to work throughout this event. My brother Manuel Ortiz and Analí Emraz from Peninsula 360. We've been involved in a partnership with Peninsula 360, also around the work related to human rights in Peru. Many of you were at that event a few weeks ago. And tonight is yet another step in that collaboration, and we're just honored that Manuel and Analí are here with us and that Peninsula 360 is doing this extraordinary work in terms of independent media based in Redwood City, but also very engaged in coverage in Mexico and on the ground in Peru. They've put together this extraordinary exhibition, hashtag Peru Resiste, that we've been collaborating with. So again, muchas gracias, Manuel y Analí, and they're making it possible for this live transmission through Facebook, both through Peninsula 360 and Global Exchange. I also want to mention my other extraordinary sister and brother, Michelle White and Miguel Perez from Informaciones Poder, from Caminante Cultural Foundation, Kiki 1010 and KPFA. Michelle and Miguel have been extraordinary allies in this work. So the role of independent media is really important in the work that we're trying to do. And so we want to honor and recognize their presence. And I think there'll be a statement in a little bit from Miguel. And I have to mention this. Michelle was my student in Mexico City more than 20 years ago, a student of journalism. And so I'm just so proud of all the work that she's doing here now through Caminante Cultural Foundation and Informaciones Poder. I also mentioned Haiti Action Committee, which will be present through the report that Merck and Leslie are presenting. In terms of Instituto Familiar de la Raza, not just do we have the honor of Carlos's presence, Carlos Izaguirre, who I'll introduce in a moment, but also of Federico Fernandez, of Miguel Reza, of Claudia de Leon, and Luz Ilimani Perez Bautista, who I have the honor to say is my daughter, who's present here. And I want to thank all of the equipo, the team of Instituto Familiar de la Raza for their extraordinary support for this event. There's another colleague also in terms of independent media, El Tecolote, that many of you know, and we've had a couple of events collaborating with through the NLG. Just down the street at Acción Latina. They couldn't be physically present tonight. They had another event, but Fatima Ramirez, who's the executive director at Acción Latina, and which houses El Tecolote, which is the longest running bilingual newspaper in the country. We need to support El Tecolote. We need to support Acción Latina. They're here supporting us too. I want to next introduce Ted Lewis from Global Exchange. We've been collaborating with Ted also in the context of the work with Peninsula 360 and the Peru delegation. And Global Exchange is doing very important work regarding these issues on both sides of the border. And in fact, the event we had in October that many of you attended regarding the case of Ayotzinapa, which continues as we speak, is through the Mexico Peace Summit that Global Exchange has been helping organize and that we've been supporting. So Ted, if you'd just like to share a couple of words on behalf of Global Exchange.
Yeah, thank you very much, Camilo. This is such a profoundly sad topic, and you know the presentation here brought to mind for me something that sitting in my memory. In 1998 at Global Exchange, we were aware of the what Camilo referred to, that in 1994 the border had been shut down and fortifications were started. I think of it as the post-NAFTA fortification of the border, and immediately people started to die in very significant numbers. And it's nothing like what the border is like now, but it was the beginning of what we're living now. And so in those first 2 years of that border, or the first few years of that border fortification, there were 350 deaths of people that had names, names, last names. We knew who they were. They had families. They were mostly from Mexico. Some were from other parts of Central America. Some were from Haiti. But they had all perished trying to cross the border. And so we decided, let's commemorate, let's make each one of those people a symbol. And so we, over at Global Exchange, painted a bunch of crosses and started a whole project to make crosses for each and every one of those people. And we carried them in the May Day parade in San Jose that year in 1998. And not May Day, it was the Cinco de Mayo parade in San Jose. And the reason I brought that up is just because when you take a number and then you actually put the names to it and see the pile of crosses and the multiple vans we had to have just to carry the crosses, that's not even, you get a sense of, oh my God, this is such a tragedy. This is such a Holocaust. And since that time, we know the border's gotten more fortified. In fact, the border has moved to Guatemala. That's really been the big trend of the last 15 years is that border enforcement is happening further and further south. And so that's why, Lopez Obrador, that's a name we wouldn't want to ever hear in this conversation, but there it is, and there's Lopez Obrador in effect collaborating with U.S. immigration policy, and that's the policy that's continued to go south. So we definitely need to work together. We need to address the economic root causes. Count on us for the APEC thing. And we've got some things going on there. I really want to talk to you about it. So thank you so much. It's so heartening to me to see this great crowd tonight. I haven't seen a crowd like this, out in San Francisco for a little while. So it's beautiful. Thank you all for what you do. And thank you, Camilo, for all of this fantastic work.
Thank you. Before I introduce the next speaker, I wanted to go back to what I was mentioning about dates. These anniversaries are really important in Mexico and Latin America in terms of a framework for political struggle and reflection, these kinds of anniversaries. I mentioned March 27th. That was the date of the fire in Ciudad Juarez, which we think should be understood as a massacre, as a mass human rights crime, and has to be addressed in that manner in terms of accountability and the joint responsibility of the US and Mexico. And we'll say a little bit more about that later. But another two dates come to mind before I introduce the next speaker from the Chiapas Support Committee, Carolina, and we're so honored that she's with us tonight. Our brother Arnoldo Garcia could not make it, but we're so honored that Carolina is here and other compañeras y compañeros. Because when we talk about important dates, the Acteal massacre in Chiapas, December 22nd, 1997, the 25th anniversary of Acteal. Many of you know the struggle of Las Abejas of Acteal, which is the organization of the survivors and victims of that massacre. That was when Chiapas was kind of a symbol for all of us of resistance, and that continues in Chiapas through Las Abejas, through the EZLN, which will be observing the 30th anniversary of the uprising this coming January 1st. So we want to have that in mind as well. And on the 26th day of every month, the Chiapas Support Committee has been standing in front of the Mexican consulate with the demand for justice, not just for Chiapas, but for human rights throughout Mexico. And specifically, why the 26th? Because it was September 26, 2014, when the 43 students from Ayotzinapa were disappeared. And yet another mass human rights crime. And we have to put Ayotzinapa in the same category as Ciudad Juarez and as Acteal. These are acts of state terror. These are mass human rights crimes with state responsibility. The way we say it in Mexico, the hashtag is fue el Estado. It was the state. Fue el Estado. So we want to stand this coming Friday, May 26th at 12 at the Mexican consulate. We ask you to join us. We'll be signing a letter to present a letter to the Mexican consulate, which will also be presenting to the US government through the Department of Homeland Security to demand accountability and justice in the case of Ciudad Juarez. So we will be standing with Chiapas Support Committee, and we honor their commitment by having been there throughout the last few years. The Mexican consulate, the address, well, I think Carolina can share with us in a moment. Yeah, I'm sorry, it's Folsom. I know it's on Folsom. Yes, thank you. Carolina, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that. We'll pass you the microphone. Thank you. This is for the folks online, so thank you, Carolina.
Yeah, so they put the consulate in a more out-of-the-way place than at the Flood Building and Market and Powell, unfortunately, but we are still there. And we tend to take photos of ourselves so we can send it to the people we're in solidarity with. And a lot of these massacres recently, and maybe for a long time, have been against indigenous people often, as well as migrants. And and the Chiapas Support Committee has been working with the Zapatistas to support their autonomous projects for the past almost 30 years. That has been our main focus. And more recently, we are focusing on other issues in Mexico. The National Indigenous Congress was formed in 1996. The Zapatistas are part of it. But there are many, many indigenous communities in Mexico that are trying to create alternatives to this neoliberal situation that is being imposed by the Mexican government, the United States, and for corporate profit. And just recently, we've been supporting the El Sur Resiste caravan. This caravan is a caravan of members of the National Indigenous Congress from the states that various mega projects, particularly Oaxaca, but also Veracruz and various states in the Yucatan Peninsula and Chiapas, indigenous people who are being displaced by mega projects that the Mexican government is really pushing. It's called the Fourth Transformation. And there are two of this caravan, which happened from the 25th of April until the 5th of May. It particularly is focusing on the Trans-Isthmus Corridor, something that the imperialists have wanted for a long time, another route across the Americas between the Atlantic and the Pacific, for goods mostly, for merchandise, and for raw materials. And so, and then the Mayan train. And people say, well, what's wrong with this? It's transportation. The Mayan train is going to bring more tourists, bring more money to the region, brings development. But one of the things people are not aware of that we've been aware of lately is that for both of these mega projects, which include highways and trains, also include new cities with lots of maquiladoras, and corporate investment in these, and particularly in the Trans-Isthmus Corridor, there are 10 new cities with factories. And the United States is supporting this. Now the information has come out that the US government is supporting some of the infrastructure, and many corporations are now on board to be investing. And one of the reasons the US is so into this, besides it helps our supposedly interests, corporate interests, is that it is a new border. These factories are going to be a place for migrants from the south to work and never get further north. As a matter of fact, the National Guard, the military is actually in charge of both of these projects. They've been put in charge of both the Maya train and the Trans-Isthmus Corridor. And it's also a national security issue, so that the indigenous people on the caravan and, who are protesting their displacement, many people who have for centuries or millennium been farming this land, living there, taking care of this land, are being displaced in order to build these cities. And when the caravan went through, actually the day after this this blockade that had been there for almost a year, I think, was displaced and violently, and women put in prison, because it was women that are there on the front lines. As with the Zapatistas, women tend to be on the front lines there. And so they were, and now the struggle is for their liberty. Anyway, I just don't know quite what else to say, except that all these are connected. The 43 students from Ayotzinapa, a normal school for indigenous youth to learn to be teachers, also a place of organizing, a place where many activists, many people who are fighting for indigenous rights and the rights of the pueblos of Mexico come from, these normal schools. And so it's this is one of the reasons why this happened. So we hope we see you on Friday at noon at Folsom and 2nd. And thank you for inviting us here, and for connecting all of our struggles. Who's next?
Terry, thanks so much. Thank you. I wanted to just add a little bit about when we say that we're honoring the 40 who died in Ciudad Juarez, and especially because of what's been mentioned about the preponderance of indigenous victims of this kind of state violence, it's important to emphasize that a majority of those who were being detained in that cell where 40 died were from Guatemala, and most of them were indigenous. There were 18 Guatemaltecos who died, 7 from El Salvador, 7 from Venezuela, 6 from Honduras, and 1 from Colombia, my homeland. And there's been an additional victim who died under treatment several weeks later, whose country of origin has still not been identified. But I've been hearing more and more reports that he was from Ecuador. So that adds up to 6 different countries of origin. The issue about the disproportionate number of victims from indigenous peoples and communities and from Guatemala specifically is very important because of our next speaker. The next 2 speakers will be Carlos Izaguirre from Instituto Familiar de la Raza, and then Maria de la Luz Bautista, who also has been doing much of the work related to the ofrenda that we see there. And then we'll close with Leslie Mullen and Judith Merkinson. Carlos Izaguirre directs the Indigenous Wellness Program at Instituto Familiar de la Raza as case manager, Indigenous Health and Wellness. I really would like Carlos to introduce himself, but the most important thing for us is his presence, the presence of his program, and the work that Instituto Familiar de la Raza does, receiving migrants as they arrive in San Francisco, in the mission, with dignity and respect. Muchas gracias, Carlos, por acompañarnos. Carlos Izaguirre.
Thank you for this invitation. I was hesitating about taking this opportunity because I didn't know how it was related with the thing that we are talking today, but then I remember my grandmother was a migrant. She crossed the border. She was detained in El Paso in the late 80s, and she was not the reason why I was here, because she worked her behind off the whole time to provide to my parents and to my tios, right, the whole time. So they didn't have to be here to work hard. And I am really privileged being here because I'm married with an American citizen, and that is why life just put me here and put me here in a place where I get to work with migrants every day. Working in Instituto is also a privilege, and I am directing this program, Indigena Health and Wellness, since last year. And we are receiving newcomers. Every week we have at least 1 or 2, and they are just coming to the city, and they are facing a lot of things, housing, food insecurity, other things. But the first thing that they are saying that they need to work because they need to pay the smuggler, the coyote, right? And that's the first debt that they are carrying with them the whole time. And it's really sad to see those stories with families. And we have a lot of single men coming to the city, and they are experiencing homeless like many others, right? Today, we are remembering the victims of this tragedy. This is the latest one, but I just remember last year. Do you remember around June when more than 50 people died after being trapped in a swollen tractor trailer? And that was in San Antonio, Texas, right? And that was during the summer when record heights in San Antonio, people yelling inside the trailer. Just imagining that scene is just horrifying, right? And we can mention every year a tragedy is happening because we don't have the control of the border, and our people, they are going to try to come because they don't have any other option. When we are asking and we are doing the intake of new clients, they are sharing their stories, and they said something that we already know. Life is impossible in my country, primarily South Mexico, Guatemala, and Central America. We have a dense population of indigenous community. 60% of our people from South Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, we are indigenous, right? And they're saying life is impossible. We need to deal with crime. We need to deal with the narco crime, because that's the thing happening in our countries. They're dealing with a lot of things, so they don't have any other options. And even seeing those tragedies as something that could prevent them from coming from our places, they're still going to try it because life is really hard in those places, right? And we are remembering the fatalities, but recently I was listening to NPR, and the University of California in San Diego, they released information about how putting the border wall higher result in more serious injuries within the community coming, right? And just between 2016 and 2019, we have 67 cases during those years. But during 2019 and 2022, we have more than 400 cases. So that is happening. The US government is putting this big deal into the failed governments like Mexico and Guatemala, right? I remember 2 years ago when Kamala Harris was visiting my lovely country, and she said, no once, but 3 times, please don't come to the United States. We don't need that. We don't, they know that they could have a future here because our countries, they are not offering anything to improve the lives of the more vulnerable people, in this case, my indigenous community. So that is what's happening. And I wish I could be helping some of those names there, instead of saying the names there, making an intake and providing case management or providing any other service. But now we are hearing from their names, families behind them, suffering the loss of their loved ones. We need to do something, right? We need to educate our people for the next election process, right? We need to educate the privileged Latinx community that they think that they don't have to care about the immigration policies because they have a regular immigration status here. We need to do that. And that the commitment of Instituto and the leaders are here tonight. Thank you.
Gracias, Carlos. Muchas gracias. Quiero presentar ahora a María de la Luz Bautista, que es activista comunitaria y que trabaja con un proyecto muy importante que ella les podrá comentar, que se llama Casa Dulas, aquí en la comunidad de este barrio y de San Francisco, y también ha trabajado con muchas otras organizaciones aquí como activista en defensa de migrantes. It's my honor to introduce María de la Luz Bautista, Luz's mom, and to share her work with Casa Dulas. Si le pueden pasar, perdón.
Pues sí, ¿no? ¿Tú traduces? Buenas noches a todas y a todos. Es un privilegio estar aquí también. me siento con un fuerte compromiso de darle voz a las mujeres migrantes.
I'm here to bring the voice of migrant women. It's an honor and privilege for me to be here.
Yo como mujer migrante también.
I myself as a migrant woman.
En este proyecto que es un gran compromiso con la vida, con las mujeres embarazadas.
I represent this project of doulas, which is a very deep commitment that is rooted in the dignity of the women we serve.
Las doulas somos, bueno, ahora tenemos ese nombre, pero siempre hemos estado, las mujeres, apoyando a otras mujeres.
So doulas is the current name that's given to this work, but women have always been doing this support for each other.
En el proceso de la creación de una nueva vida.
In the process of creation of a new life.
Y en este proyecto aquí en San Francisco hemos logrado tener un trabajo conjunto, o he iniciado un trabajo conjunto con un grupo de parteras en Tijuana.
And we've begun to collaborate with a group of midwives in Tijuana, so on the other side of the border.
Y ha sido impactante pensar en que las mujeres que han llegado ahí a Tijuana en su caminar de migrantes.
And many of these are migrant women in Tijuana who have arrived there as migrants and are seeking this support.
Es posible que una de esas mujeres llegaron hasta acá y acá.
And then many of those arrive here in San Francisco.
Y fueron apoyadas por nuestro grupo de doulas.
And were supported by the doulas here.
También es muy fuerte saber tener ese compromiso de ser ese soporte familiar que pierden en el camino,
It's
como
very
ya se ha
important for
hablado.
us to try and play that role of providing a family-based support that they may not have here when they come.
Sí, son incontables las mujeres que llegan aquí solas, embarazadas.
There are uncounted numbers of women who arrive in these circumstances.
A veces con pareja, a veces no.
Sometimes with a partner, sometimes not.
Y bueno, esto es apenas un trabajo que se está fortaleciendo y hay mucho
So this
que
is
hacer.
work that's still taking root here and that we need to strengthen.
Estar aquí con todos y todas ustedes da esa fuerza.
To be with all of you gives us strength.
Gracias por estar aquí.
Thank you for coming and thank you for sharing tonight. I now want to ask Judith Merkinson and Leslie Mullen to present their report back from their participation in the Journey for Justice that was organized by Witness at the Border and co-sponsored by the Lawyers Guild here and nationally. And they also represent Haiti Action Committee and will be sharing both what they saw at the border in December, how that connects to what's going on now, and how it connects to the continuing struggle for the liberation of the people of Haiti that we're recommitting ourselves to support tonight as well. Thank you, Leslie and Merck.
Make a few remarks at the end. Dear Leslie. And I just want to introduce again Pierre Labatier, the co-founder of the committee has been doing work for more than 30 years.
And Terry, who made the
Oh, yeah. And Terry, who makes the tap taps for our demonstrations.
I'm going to just turn down the lights a little bit so that people can see better.
I'm not sure where the lights are.
Now the lights are.
Don't make it too dark.
There must be another light.
So I want to
Oh, there we
really,
go. Perfect.
And this is just when we were talking about the detention center. This is a picture of it. And there's a video which shows, this is just a clip, but it just shows them running away, the guards, as the fire is happening. They escaped and kept them locked in.
It's really an honor to be with you all tonight, and it is really empowering to share our viewpoints and to share our camaraderie and, and share in the work and the commitment to this work. Merck and I both went on the trip, the Journey for Justice, last December, where we did half the trip. The Journey for Justice traveled all the way from Brownsville, Texas to San Ysidro, California, stopping at every port of entry along the border. And we joined from El Paso to San Ysidro. So I'm going to share some of our experiences from that. I want to start by saying that we live in a country that expels more people who dare to cross its borders without permission than any other country in the world. And that Biden himself, the Biden administration, has deported a record of 2.5 million people in either back to Mexico or to their home country since 2020. And at the same time, as other people have recognized here tonight, it is US foreign policies, it is war, militarization, intervention, coups, support for authoritarian regimes like in Haiti, and land and resource exploitation, the neoliberal agenda that is really forcing people to migrate in order to survive for their very lives. Moved by this and also by the images of Haitians desperately trying to flee Haiti, Merck and I joined the Journey for Justice. Everywhere that we went, we were confronted with the obscene presence of the border wall that crosses the Sonoran Desert, goes through mountains, through cities, through even people's backyards, through shopping malls. On one side of the shopping mall in San Ysidro, there was a maquiladora. On the other side of the wall was a Gap. So the things that would be made like quarter of a mile away for nothing were being sold on the other side of the border. The wall is an imposing 30-foot barrier that you can see here, but we're going to show you some pictures later where you see the human size relationship. And it enforces who and what are permitted to cross the border. So corporations, capital, weapons, goods, those are all fine to cross. Human beings from the global south, no, we know that. Southern Arizona is one of the most militarized regions in the entire world and also one of the deadliest paths of migration. El Paso is ground zero for what Camilo spoke about earlier, this doctrine, this US doctrine known as prevention through detention. And what it meant originally was a deliberate scheme to build the walls in locations that would funnel migrants into the most remote and dangerous parts of the Sonoran Desert. And the result has been so many, many deaths. More than 7,000 human remains have been recovered since this doctrine was deployed in the 90s. Last year was the deadliest on record when more than 800 people died trying to cross the US-Mexico border. And we saw some of the commemorations of places in the desert where people have put crosses where human remains have been found. Of course, this has not stopped migration because people have no choice. Racist exclusionary border policies are equally deadly. Title 42, that has now just ended, effectively closed US borders and left tens of thousands of refugees trapped in Mexico in destitute encampments. The more the US and Mexico restrict access, the more people are forced to live in these terrible encampments, which give power to the cartels. which is generating billions of dollars in profits for the cartels, and which is responsible for thousands and thousands of rapes, kidnappings, extortions, and deaths. More deaths, as we know, are inevitable as the U.S. implements a new anti-immigration policy that eliminates all legal avenues to asylum. And those are avenues that are codified in both international law and U.S. law. They're required to provide asylum for anyone who shows up at the border, no matter where or how or from what country they're from, whether they cross legally or illegally. That is the law. But the U.S. instead has put in a plan that will deport any migrant who arrives at the border. There is a presumption that you're ineligible for asylum unless you follow certain very convoluted rules. Refugees must present themselves at a time and a place pre-scheduled via this deeply flawed and unreliable Department of Homeland Security app called CBP-1, which is just another tool of exclusion. It's a tool of metering. It is like completely doesn't work. And if we have time later, we can talk about more how it works and doesn't work. U.S. racist exclusionary border policies are creating overcrowded, sprawling tent cities and conditions that amount to torture and put lives in danger. Denied the right to claim asylum, refugees are at the mercy of indifferent officials, criminal gangs, arbitrary detention in overcrowded facilities, and dangerous informal crossings. And as we've already acknowledged, in late March, the world reacted in horror at the result of these policies when 40 refugees from Central America died in a fire at Ciudad Juarez detention center. This week, as Camilo mentioned, an 8-year-old girl died in U.S. custody after her mother repeatedly begged Border Patrol to take her to for medical care. She was the third child this year who died in U.S. custody, and the second who died this month. Last Thursday, a member of the Tohono O'odham Nation in Arizona, in the southern part of Arizona where we went, was shot dead on his doorstep by the U.S. Border Patrol. And we saw in this area of the Tohono O'odham Nation, it's one of the largest nations in the U.S. in the South. We saw their land that had been torn apart by the border wall and that separated their people who for generations, for hundreds and hundreds of years, have crossed back and forth across the border. This is the nation that the Border Patrol has now turned into basically a concentration camp. It is really literally a military occupation zone, and it's peopled with, or it's resourced with all these surveillance towers. And they survey everyone. They survey the people crossing the border. They also survey the members of the nation. And people there say it's become like apartheid to live on this land. In the case of Haitian refugees, Biden has out-Trumped Trump. He's expelled more Haitians than any previous administration. It's kind of shocking. He has literally out-Trumped Trump. 30,000 Haitians have been forcibly returned to Haiti, and many tens of thousands more are trapped at the border, both at Texas and in Southern California, San Isidro, Juarez. Everyone remembers the racist images that we saw of the Del Rio encampment. That was in Texas. That was home to 15,000 Haitians who had been traveling and trying to get to the U.S. when the Border Patrol police drove their horses and assaulted the Haitians with their whips. Well, with their reins, but they were whips. These cruel images exposed to the entire world U.S. total disregard for Black Haitian lives,
But even as the headlines around Del Rio faded away, Biden doubled down on deporting Haitian refugees to a country that his very own State Department acknowledges is undergoing a severe crisis and massive human rights violations. Just over a year ago, Haitians were the third largest nationality. There were 83,000 Haitians crossing the difficult and dangerous journey from South America through the Darien Gap, trying to reach the United States. They had left Haiti after the 2010 earthquake when Haitians were recruited to Brazil with the promise of construction jobs at the World Cup and the Olympics. And as work dried up and racist sentiment against Haitians spiked, they left for Chile. And then the same thing happened in Chile. And Chile closed its doors. And given what it was like in Haiti at the time, people began trying to get to the United States. On the seas, for Haitians who attempt a treacherous sea route and survive it, the U.S. Coast Guard, which is the military arm of Homeland Security, patrols the Caribbean, waiting to intercept and repatriate them. And these interceptions are getting worse and worse. Read about them every day and every week in the paper. Last year, the Coast Guard returned over 7,100 Haitian refugees to Haiti. It was the highest number in 2 decades, and I think that we can expect to continue to grow. Conditions that propel Haitians to flee their country are the direct result of 19 years of U.S. intervention after the U.S. orchestrated a coup that overthrew the democratic progressive Haitian government in 2004. Since that coup, it's been the U.S., the UN, and a bloc of countries called the Core Group. These countries effectively are governing Haiti. So everything that you see going on in Haiti now is on these people's plate. Foreign neocolonial control has propelled Haiti into the deepest crisis, worse than ever, and the near total deconstruction of civil society. Insecurity, violence, kidnapping, rape, and repression are everywhere. 5 million Haitians in a nation of 12 million and a nation of farmers are suffering crisis levels of starvation never before seen in the Americas, only seen in places like Afghanistan or Somalia. This is on the plate of the US and the UN. Here in the Bay Area, it's important for us to recognize, as other people have said, that the US-Mexico border is not as far away as we think. In fact, California has 5 ICE detention centers. They're all run by for-profit corporations. They are big business. And California actually passed a law saying they couldn't do that, but they've done it. Recently, 80 detainees at Bakersfield's Mesa Verde Detention Center, which is run by GEO Group, were on hunger strike protesting the inhumane living and working conditions there. The border is a product of US imperialism, and ultimately solving the crisis at the border is going to require defeating all of the US policies that have created it in the first place. And so any discussion of the border has to both address the issues of immigration and the causes of migration, of globalization, neoliberalism, and occupation. So above all, we have to guarantee that those who do have to leave their countries have the right to safety and the right to asylum, whether here in the US or anywhere in the world. And I'm just going to close by a quote from the poet Warsan Shire, who said, "Nobody leaves home unless home is in the mouth of a shark." Thank you very much.
Next.
I think that, I think it's really important that we're here in this space right now around the justice for Sean Monterrosa, who was also from an immigrant family, who was killed by the police while he was kneeling. He's just one of the youth that has been killed by Bay Area police. And of course, the police there and the police on the border are one police. It is state terror. And just to echo what, well, before I say that, like we are in a world, the history of the world is a history of migration. From the very, very beginning, from Africa, we have migrated. And it's in all of our literature. It's in the Bible. It's in Shakespeare. It's everywhere. And the history of migration is actually one of the strengths of our populations. And unless those of us here, it's one of us here is indigenous, able to stay on our ancestral lands, every single one of us is the product of migration, whether it's right now or generations back. That's the history. And that's really the history of so many places in the world. So we have an obligation to create this world. And as Leslie said, more people are migrating and being displaced now than at any other time, perhaps since the plague, the first, the Black Death plague. And so I think we are incumbent. We cannot just do humanitarian aid, although that's essential. That's like one half. And then the other half is fighting our government and creating a different kind of ideology that says everybody is welcome. What you say on your T-shirt, or saying in Haiti, every person is a person. And that's one of the most essential things. And so I think as we're here in the shadow of Sean, and as we're here in the shadow of all these people, we have to remember that we do have to fight against our government, and we do have to create an international movement. The domestic and the international are one. And that's all. Thanks.
Espérame con el celular.
Miguel, mi hermano Miguel, ¿dónde está? Miguel Pérez o Michelle, iban a tomar la palabra. Michelle, por favor. Michelle White from Información es Poder. Please. En español, dale como quieras. Sí. ¿En español? Ay, disculpa.
Muchas gracias. Ha sido un placer estar acompañándolos esta tarde en este evento tan importante, reflexionando sobre un problema tan crucial y que sigue recordándonos y se sigue empeorando y nos sigue recordando la importancia de lograr un cambio. Y bueno, gracias por la invitación, y nosotros abrimos nuestros micrófonos para poder compartir todas estas voces que son tan importantes, y queremos crecer y compartir aún más lo que estamos haciendo y lograr realmente una conciencia en la gente, porque a veces las personas es una nota y en lo que sigue, estamos muy metidos en nuestra vida diaria y es bastante entendible, pero también tenemos que tener el corazón y la mentalidad de que hay personas que están pasando momentos muy difíciles y que también necesitan ayuda y necesitan una oportunidad. Y pues en la medida que nosotros le podamos dar la posibilidad de tener esa oportunidad, les podríamos cambiar la vida. Y aquí estoy. I am so sorry. I'm sorry.
Thank you so much for allowing us to be here. And we're from Información es Poder. We're here to share and to open our microphones to have people who want to talk about these such important issues such as this of the migrants who come here and who struggle. And we understand that many people have a lot of things on their plates and they're living their lives, but it's very important to bring an awareness of what is happening around the world and what is happening to our people. And we're here basically to support your work and to support the work of our community. A ver si se me olvidó otra cosa más.
No,
¿Alguien?
it's basically that the message and
¿Es el mensaje?
yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
We have been on air for 13 years and the mission has been the same. As Camilo mentioned, I was his student 20, I don't know how many years, 20 plus years ago. And it was a life changer for me. He planted a seed in me and well, it definitely grew. So I'm happy to be part of this and part of this fight. And in the measure I can support the work all of you are doing, it's my privilege and my honor to be part of this and to help make a change. Y es mi placer y mi deber colaborar en la medida que yo pueda a este cambio, ¿no? Camilo plantó en mí, yo fui su estudiante hace más de 20 años y él pues de alguna manera creó esa conciencia en mí y de la misma manera que nosotros tratamos de crear esa conciencia en otras personas para lograr un cambio, porque se requiere que todo el mundo pongamos un granito de arena y que logremos un cambio en las conciencias, a lo mejor una persona a la vez, pero con eso es suficiente, con una persona a la vez que tenga esa conciencia y esa disponibilidad para ayudar y para tender una mano a quien lo necesita, pues es nuestra oportunidad. Muchas gracias. Y gracias, Camilo, por la oportunidad.
Gracias.
Sí, sí.
Sigue así.
Okay.
Por favor.
Yeah, me están dando la oportunidad. They're giving me the opportunity to speak. I guess I'll sit here. My name is Lisa Milos, and I am Chilean American. And there's two things that I want to talk about very quickly. I'm also a member of the KPFA Listener Station Board, and I'm here primarily to please ask for the support for people to pay their $25 a year donation to KPFA before June 30th so you can vote in the next Listener Station Board elections. Now, the reason why I'm saying this, I'm going to bring you back 50 years ago, okay? I'm bringing this back to my own experience as an 11-year-old right after the coup in Chile. We're coming to 50 years commemorating the coup in Chile. And I remember the importance of independent media. People really don't realize how important it is, but this came home very close to me when I was 11, and I was working with my mother, helping to try to bring attention to the detentions of people who were being detained in Chile. Now, when I was a child, I was helping her cut out the news articles to follow the campaigns, the international campaigns that were set up by an organization at the time was U.S. Latin American political prisoners over in Hell's Kitchen in New York City, and I asked my mother at one time. I said to her, "How many prisoners? How many people detained did we free?" And she said to me, "We weren't able to free any of them because the junta is still too powerful, but at least we were able to make sure that they did not become disappeared. Because the international campaigns were set up so that we would at least ensure that they would not become part of the disappeared." And that brought home to me the importance of media in bringing awareness to people. Now, what's been going on at KPFA is that many people don't even realize that KPFA is part of a larger network, Pacifica Foundation. And Pacifica Foundation has 5 radio stations, KPFA in Berkeley, Houston, New York, WBAI in New York, Houston KPFT, and KPFK in Los Angeles, and WPFW in Washington, D.C. And there's always been a lot of problems. Everybody knows what happened, right, back in 1999 and all that kind of stuff. I'm not going to go back to all that. But there is, unfortunately, the Democratic Party wants to make sure that their narrative is the only one that comes out, okay? So if people have noticed lately that the news department in KPFA, this sounds beginning to sound more like NPR rather than actually having a real analysis going on there. Okay, all right. Well, there's very good programs on KPFA, things that bring out a lot of the issues that were brought here. There's good programs on it, but lately we've had, for example, at 5 a.m. slot, somebody by the name of Ian Masters, who's a warmonger, who's been trying to actually putting on the air, saying we need to send ammunition to the Ukraine, for example, and calling Maduro a dictator, for example. We've also had, the issue at the KPFA LSP. In fact, one of our members, Frank Sterling, he is a fantastic person. He was a technical director of the apprenticeship program, which, by the way, got cut off because of no money, supposedly. He is the journalist that was covering police brutality in Antioch. And in September 2021, he was attacked and tasered, and he had trumped up charges. And he's a member of the LSB. We brought forth a resolution to the KPFA LSB March before last, trying to get support for him, and they denied support for him. In fact, they allowed a disparagement of him and calling into question his innocence. We're talking about the KPFA LSB, okay? And then this last meeting, we again brought another resolution asking for supporting him, bringing forth the new information regarding the racist and homophobic text messages that had been the big scandal that happened with the Antioch Police Department. And there's been a lot of deaths happening in Antioch as well. Angelo Quinto was one of them as well. And again, the KPFA LSB did not want to support this. They started saying, oh, it's going to bring us liabilities and all that kind of stuff. So what I'm asking you for is to support the Rescue Pacifica slate, okay? You can check it out on rescuepacifica.net. We want to bring back Pacifica to its roots, to its radical roots. We want anti-imperialist programming. We want programming that has to do with the true reasons why people leave their countries, the reasons. Now, I'm going to make it very short. I'm sorry about this time, but I also want to bring forth, because it's the 50th anniversary of the coup, there's an organization called Labor Education on International, on AFL-CIO operations, right? The AFL-CIO has been involved in what's called, they turned the word solidarity on its head. They call it the Solidarity Center, but they've been doing basically getting National Endowment for Democracy funding, like they did in Chile 50 years ago, to destabilize governments and to get it, basically to intervene. And they're using the money of workers in the United States. So on September 11th, there's going to be a demonstration in Washington, D.C. in front of AFL-CIO headquarters, as well as there's going to be some demonstrations in the School of Economics in Chicago as well, Milton Friedman School. And here in July, during Labor Fest, there's going to be a lot of events here. So I hope people join up and come to these events and support that as well. But please, before June 30th, giving you $25 donation to KPFA and vote this time, please. We need a good people on the LSB. Thank you.
Thank you. We want to close the program with a couple of things. One is there's a letter that we will be able to circulate. My daughter Luz has it over there, that we want to deliver with your support, with your signatures, to the Mexican consulate on Friday, and also to the Department of Homeland Security in the US. Also, I want to let you know that there's some refreshments there in the back for everybody so that we can talk a bit more informally. But we want to bring this back to Francisco and to Maria Cristina to close the sort of formal part of the program. We're a little bit over time, and we also want to do a shout out for Josiah and for Medicine for Nightmares for making this space available. Because we're going to continue to do events here because this is a vital bookstore and a vital space. Por favor, Francisco y Maria Cristina. And the letter will be passed around in both English and Spanish. Please sign on.
El micrófono. Where's the microphone? ¿El micrófono? No, pero... Lisa.
Muy bien,
¿Puedes?
parece ser que ya estamos un poco cansaditos, así que vamos a cerrar. Muy sencillo, vamos a cerrar poniéndonos de pie. Diciendo una palabra de compromiso que nos queremos llevar. Espontáneo, no tienen que dar la vuelta, nomás. Una palabra que quieran decir de lo que se habló, una sola palabra.
Any word, one word that you want to express about what everybody talked about here. Just one word, express how you feel about that or what you think about that.
And particularly in solidarity as you leave. And we'll close with a little refrain.
Me llevo información.
I take information. Popcorn, it doesn't have to be around, just popcorn style.
Lo que guste.
Dignity.
Con todos estos compromisos que hemos hablado desde el corazón y otros que los hemos guardado en silencio, pero que sabemos que van en nuestras vidas. Lo vamos a cerrar con un abrazo que nos demos cada uno de nosotros.
Después de esta canción. After the song.
After the song.
Okay.
No moriste en vano, tomamos la antorcha que nos deja por la libertad. No moriste en vano, tomamos la antorcha que nos deja por la libertad. You did not die in vain. We take on the flame you left us por la libertad. That's it. You did not die in vain. We take on the flame you left us por la libertad. No moriste en vano. Tomamos la antorcha que nos dejas por la libertad. Let's see, try. No moriste en vano.
Tomamos la antorcha de la libertad.
Tomamos la antorcha que nos dejas
Tomamos la antorcha que nos dejas
por la libertad.
por la libertad.
No moriste en vano. Tomamos la antorcha. Tomamos la antorcha que nos dejas por la libertad. No moriste en vano. Tomamos la antorcha que nos dejas por la libertad. You did not die in vain. You did not die in vain. We take on the flame you left us por la libertad. You did not die in vain. You did not die in vain. We take on the flame. We take on the flame you left us por la libertad. No moriste en vano. Tomamos la antorcha que nos deja por la libertad. Let me hear you strong. No moriste. Tomamos la antorcha. Tomamos la antorcha que nos deja por la libertad. You did not die in vain. You did not vain. We take on the flame you left us por la libertad. You did not die in vain. You did not die in vain. We take on the flame you left us por la libertad. On Friday I'll go to the Mexican consulate. I'll be flying out in the street. In November I will to the Moscone Center. We will shut down the FX disaster. No moriste en vano. Tomamos la antorcha que nos deja por la libertad. Otra, no moriste. No moriste. Strong. Tomamos la antorcha que nos deja. You did not die in vain. You did not die in vain. We take on the flame you left us por la libertad. You did not die in vain. We take on the flame you left us por la libertad, por la libertad, por la libertad. Strong. Por la libertad, por la libertad. Caminante, un abrazo.
Ahora sí, denles un abrazo. Ahora sí, denles un abrazo.
Thank you for coming. You know this great
Folks, so there's
celebrity. He's a celebrity.
Please support the National Lawyers Guild. NLG.org. We need your support. Thank you.